At some point you have to stop tweeting and start talking. At some point you have to get off Twitter and get off the message boards and get to your live post-game show. When you said you're going to start it at 11:45 and it's already 11:46, you feel like you're running behind on time. And when you're about to sit down, you're about to talk about a loss, an inexplicable loss, a brutally bad loss, and not the first one of the season, you don't want to be late for that, right? You want to be on time. You want to make sure you're there when the people are there waiting for you for the Panther-Lair Post-Game show in the aftermath of Pitt's 24-10 loss at Louisville. A game that was an abject disaster in so many ways. Really, almost always, save for the defense, which played well. An abject disaster, though, in the ways that so much of Pitt's season this year has been a bit of a disaster. And that's on offense. Even in the wake of breaking a 46-year record, it's still hard to say that this offense this season has been anything short of a disaster. And that's doubly true when viewed in the shadow of last season. I think we all knew that last season's achievements were not going to be matched this year. This year, they weren't going to set a new scoring record. They weren't going to top what they did last year. They weren't going to produce another Heisman Trophy finalist or another Biletnikoff Award winner. They were going to take a step back. They were going to score less. They were going to produce less. But that didn't mean they had to win less. We talked so much in the offseason about how a balanced offense could be, if not as successful in terms of production, still fairly successful in terms of wins and losses. And that hasn't happened. As Pitt has now surpassed their loss total, their regular season loss total from a year ago. They sit at 4-3 overall, 1-2 in the ACC, staring down 5 games that look increasingly more difficult when viewed in light of what's happened here tonight, what happened here 3 weeks ago, and what's happened intermittently throughout the course of the season as this offense has struggled to get on track. And we'll talk a lot about Kedon Slovis. And we'll talk a lot about his play. And we'll talk a lot about the decision to leave him in the game coming out of the first half. We'll talk a lot about throwing 2 interceptions in the red zone and another, a fumble that ends up getting returned for a touchdown. We'll talk about a brutally bad missed screen pass on a 3rd and 10 in the second half, or maybe it was in the fourth quarter, actually. A play that very well could have led to a touchdown and given Pitt a 17-7 lead as opposed to falling behind 14-10. And we'll talk about all that. We'll talk about whether Pat Narduzzi should have benched Kedon Slovis. We'll talk about whether Nick Patty could do better. We'll talk about whether Nate Yarnell is the future of this offense. We'll talk about all those things. But I got something else. I got something else on my mind that I was thinking about as this game went on. And we got to the end of the game and the game ended. It's something that I think has probably been lingering in my mind for a little while. Something that I can't figure out. I can't understand. And this is something that we can't really just discuss fresh, if you know what I mean. So we got my friend here. You might know him, my friend Clayton James. Clayton James is going to give me a little help here with this one. All right? Because here's the thing. Kedon Slovis threw like 60 touchdown passes at USC. Konate Mumpfield caught 60, 70 passes last year at Akron as a freshman All-American. Gavin Bartholomew was a freshman All-American last year. Izzy Abanikanda clearly got talent. There's no mistaking that. I mean, the guy's playing like a Doak Walker winner. Right? You got 5 starting offensive linemen coming back who admittedly haven't played together. They've dealt with injuries, but some of those guys are still out in the field. Tonight you had Gabe Hoy starting again. You had Marcus Minor starting again. Jake Cradle starting in a different position. Jared Wayne has proven himself to be a good, talented, productive wide receiver, reliable wide receiver. Rodney Hammond showed what he could do last year. Played a lot as a freshman. Was productive. He's missed time this year. He's been injured. But he's played, in 2 games now. Bub Means was productive in his own unique ways at Louisiana Tech. And I guess what I'm saying, what me and my friend Clayton James are saying here, and I might have to ask Clayton to help us out again, but I guess what I'm saying is this offensive personnel is better than the product that's been put on the field. When you have Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year, you have 2 freshman All-American, you have returning starters at wide receiver or on the offensive line, you have these talented running backs. There's talent on this offense. And I'm not sure if spending the first 6 or 7 weeks of the season talking about this player's mistakes or that player's mistakes was necessarily the right approach. Because what's the X factor here? What's the X factor that's affecting all of this? I'm not smart enough to sit here and tell you that I know the problems with Pitt's offensive scheme, or that I know the issues with Pitt's offensive, with what kind of plays they draw up, why they work, why they don't work. I like to joke, Frank Cignetti should stop calling the plays that result in turnovers, and there's a lot of truth to that. The 2 interceptions that Keaton Slovis threw, Frank Cignetti should not have called interceptions on those plays. He should have called a pass on the flat to Daniel Carter, and another ball gets thrown into the first row of the stands, as opposed to an interception. He should have called those plays instead of the ones that ultimately got picked off. He shouldn't have called a play where Rodney Hammond fumbles. All right, those things can't be controlled. Injuries can't be controlled. The turnovers are on the players. The injuries are fluke things. Miss reads, miss assignments, Gabe Hoy not knowing the cadence, not knowing the snap count. Those things are on the players. But we're 7 games into this season. 7 games with this offensive talent, with this roster, with this personnel, and it's still a disaster on offense. It's still an unproductive disaster. You scored 10 points in a college football game. And yes, you had 3 turnovers in the red zone. But those weren't your only 3 possessions of the night. And that doesn't explain why this offense has struggled all season. And I wanted to backdate it to the end of the first half against Tennessee. I wanted to backdate it. Well, Keaton Slovis took that big shot, and man, he got hit, and that was just tough after that. And he hasn't been the same since then, and he hasn't. But you can't convince me that he's as bad as he looked tonight. You can't convince me that these receivers are as ineffective as they've looked this season. You can't convince me that Gavin Bartholomew is as ineffective as he's been this year. And maybe I'm the last one to get on the train of blaming the offensive coordinator. But here I am. Here I am. Because there's no reason this offense should be as bad as it's been. And whether you change the quarterback or not, I'm not sure if it fixes the problem. When teams load up to stop the run, this offense is screwed. And why would you plan for anything else? There's no threat in the passing game, either by design or by execution. If you have an effective pass rush, which Louisville did. And look, Louisville came into this game leading the ACC in sacks. They have a good pass rush. Pitt didn't get beat up front in the pass rush by a chump team. Louisville is good rushing the passer. But if teams load up to stop the run, Pitt has no alternative. Pitt can't do anything through the air. And I'm not so sure that I think it's about personnel anymore. Because the more I look at this personnel, because I spent a lot of the first 6-7 weeks of this season thinking to myself, how do we get this so wrong? How are we so wrong about Keaton Slovis? How are we so wrong about Konate Mumfield? How are we so wrong about Gavin Bartholomew? How are we so wrong about Jared Wayne? How are we so wrong, not the running backs, because Izzy Abanikanda has been great. But how are we so wrong about all these guys? How do we get it so wrong? How do we base all of our expectations about these players on their past performance? None of this was guessing. None of this was, we weren't sitting here and saying Carter Johnson, a converted defensive tackle, would lead the ACC in receptions among tight ends. We didn't go there. We just talked about a freshman All-American wide receiver, a former Pac-12 All-Conference player, Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year, Pac-12 Offensive Rookie of the Year, a guy who, threw 60 passes at the Power 5 level. We made our predictions based on that, based on past experience, on past production, on resumes. How do we get that so wrong? Maybe we didn't get it wrong about the personnel. Maybe the issues go beyond that. Maybe the issues go upstairs. And I don't think Pat Narduzzi is the type of coach who would make a staff change in the middle of a season. Hell, he wouldn't even make a quarterback change in the middle of a game. So I don't think anything like that is going to happen. But there has to be a serious reevaluation of where this offense is. Because there's no reason that this roster, with this talent, is 4-3. It should be 6-1 at worst. And they should still be headed well toward that 10-2 record that I predicted for them before the season. I thought this was a 10-2 team. I think talent-wise, they are a 10-2 team. I think talent-wise, they shouldn't have no issue. They should have no issue winning this Coastal Division. Because the Coastal Division is not good. It's not good. Carolina is the best team in the Coastal Division. They give 300 rushing yards to Duke. And they're the best team in the Coastal? Duke just won at Miami 45-21. So I'm freaking positive that Miami is not the best team in the Coastal, and I'm pretty sure Duke still isn't. Maybe they'll get there in another year or two. It seems like they're heading in the right direction, but I'm pretty sure they're not. Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech. This is a laughable division. And Pitt right now is 1-2. And 4-3 overall. And, I always try to have perspective, try to hold back. When they lose to Western Michigan last year, come on, they're not going to go 3-9, they're not going to go 4-8. They'll be better. It was a bad day and all this stuff. And ultimately, I was right about that. And I'm not going to sit here and predict that they're going to go 0-5 the rest of the way. I don't think they're going to be a 4-8 team or a 5-7 team. Somebody, a good friend of mine, level-headed guy, texted me and said, I wonder if they're going to have trouble making a bowl. And maybe, maybe they are going to have to fight to get those last 2 wins to get bowl eligibility. And then we're going to, suffer through a whole lot over the next 5 games if that's the case. But it just doesn't make sense with this roster and this personnel. Because like I say, I think to a large extent, we've spent a lot of time over the first 7 weeks of this season convincing ourselves that the personnel wasn't as good as we thought it was. Defensive line, they're not as good as we thought they were. Linebackers, they stink. They're all, those guys aren't ready to play. They look lost out there. Secondary's not as good as nobody's really trashing the secondary all that much. They've been fine. And, in offensive personnel, they're not, they were way overhyped. I'm not so sure that they were. I'm not so sure that the offensive personnel was overhyped. Keaton Slovis, we can have some conversations about what's going on with Keaton Slovis. We can have some conversations about why he was, or more importantly, why he was not removed from this game, and whether he should have been removed from this game when he throws 2 interceptions, down near the end zone. Both on terrible decisions. I mean, both really bad decisions to throw those passes. And the missed screen pass, I mean, that's an easy one. It's called to be an easy pass. The reason that play is called is because it's an easy completion for you, and maybe you get lucky and Izzy can run for more than 10 yards and convert a first down for you. And he had room to do it, and he had the block out there from Marcus Minor to do it. And you just burn the pass right past his head. Keaton Slovis has not been perfect. Far from it. And look, I was on board with potentially making a change there. Maybe at halftime, certainly at some point in the second half, and probably at halftime. If it was me, if I was Pat Narduzzi, I probably would have changed quarterbacks at halftime. If they could do it at Clemson and say, DJ's still our guy, he's going to come back next week and be the starter again, Pitt can do that too. And give yourself a spark. Give yourself a chance. They didn't have a chance in this game. Not with the way this offense plays, not with the way this offense has been going. And if it's going to take breaking a Tony Dorsett record every week to have any chance of winning an ACC game, this could be a long rest of the season. All right, I'm going to put the Clayton James away. Well, I might get him back out. We'll see. Let's get into some comments and questions and see what people are talking about here. All right. We got a lot of super chatters jumping in early, and I appreciate that. If you want to be a super chatter, you can click that $sign on the bottom, and you can offer a couple bucks to support the podcast. We appreciate that for sure. Michael B., haven't seen you in a while, but we appreciate you. Being a super chatter says, Chris, this loss was completely unacceptable on so many levels. How can a team with 2 weeks to prepare show up at a conference opponent and look so putrid? Slovis should have been benched. Why didn't Pat Narduzzi bench him? I'm pissed. You know what's funny? Look at the beginning of the game, right? Louisville gets a first down. They get 15 yards on a late hit from Brandon Hill, but then Pitt forces a punt. Ends up being a touchback. And Pitt drives. You know what I mean? They drive and drive well. They're inside the 30, right? The offense actually looks pretty good. It starts out with a rollout pass, a play-action rollout pass to Daniel Carter. Izzy runs a little bit, get a pass to El Barto. Real excited about that, to get El Barto involved for 18 yards. Abanikanda gets another big run and all this stuff. And then they throw the interception. Bad mistake, but pretty good drive. Unfortunately doomed by such a bad play at the end. Forced a 3-and-out. Second drive, they come out and score a touchdown. They get the touchdown out of the Wildcat formation. So actually, the first two drives, not terrible. Pretty good, actually. Aside from a really bad decision by Kedon Slovis to throw that interception. But the first two drives I thought were really good. Third drive, things kind of fall apart. Slovis almost gets sacked on first down. Jake Cradle takes a false start on second down. How do you false start if you're the center? I've never understood procedure penalties on the center. How do you false start? If there's anybody who should know the snap count, if there's anybody who should be paying extra close attention to what the quarterback is saying, you don't have to watch the ball because you are the one with your hand on the ball snapping it. How do you have a false start on the center? All right. Oh, and then after the false start, on 2nd and 15, Pitt ends up taking a timeout because the play clock's running down. They end up getting a first down, 2 first downs, and then they have to punt. So that didn't go well. Fourth drive was when they ran the Wildcat. They get all the way down into Louisville territory before Rodney Hammond fumbles. And then the fifth drive is the really bad interception, and that was the drives through the first half. Overall, even though they came out with only 7 points, and they came out with only 7 points because they had 3 drives that were doomed by turnovers. But I thought overall, the offensive performance in terms of, for the most part, play calling, for the most part, execution, aside from those 3 turnover plays, I thought it was a pretty solid first half from the offense. And it was a real disappointment that they ended up with only 7 points. It felt like, they should have had 21 or 28 points just based on the opportunities they wasted away with the turnovers. And so it wasn't a terrible first. You talk about coming out from 2 weeks off and they look so unprepared. That game's 7-7 at halftime. Very well could have and probably should have been 21-7, 28-7, 21-0, 28-0. Louisville's touchdown comes. They drove the length of the field. So, you give them credit. They made good plays. What did they have? They got the touchdown when Eric Hallett jumped on what he thought was going to be a screen pass and left his guy wide open for the touchdown pass. But, I thought overall the offense, for the most part, did things that a good offense would do. An offense that could score 3 or 4 touchdowns and a half would do. They just had 3 crucial mistakes, 3 crucial errors at really bad times. And then they went into a shell in the second half. There was nothing going in the second half. It was just a disaster in the second half. Why didn't Pat Narduzzi bench Kedon Slovis? My only thought is that he looked at it and said, okay, Kedon made 2 really bad decisions, but the offense seems to be moving the ball pretty well as it is. So I'm going to stick with him. I don't know. I'm sure he was asked after the game. I'm obviously not there. I'm back in Pittsburgh, so I don't know what his answer was. I'm sure it's not going to be an answer that would satisfy anyone. I can't really imagine what he would say, other than we had a lot of faith in Kedon. We wanted to keep going with it, and we wanted to, I don't know, thought he could turn it around. I'm really not sure. Let's see here. Get some other super chatters in here. John Waffle H2P says, as an alum, this is embarrassing. Kedon Slovis needs to be benched. So what's interesting about this, as we talk about Slovis getting benched, and we talk about personnel, and we talk about play calling, we talk about coordinators, is you get into a question of, if you bench Kedon Slovis, does the offense improve if there are inherent issues in the scheme, in the play calling? And I'm not smart enough to say what the issues are in the play calling. I'm just having a really hard time tonight sort of reconciling what I believe to be the talent on this offense and the complete lack of production. I'm having a hard time. And I tell you what, honestly, I think on this flight home to Pittsburgh from Louisville, I think Pat Narduzzi has to be thinking long and hard about that question, that very simple question of how did this talent, which I felt pretty good about this talent, how did this talent end up producing like this? How did this talent end up being this unproductive? How did this talent, all the pieces seem to be here. We feel really good about all these pieces, and yet the end result is, pretty bad. How is that possible? What am I missing here? This is what Pat Narduzzi needs to ask himself. He needs to say, I've got the sum of its parts, and I've got the whole, and the whole is far less than the sum of its parts. I like all these little pieces here, but when I put them all together, something's not working. Something's not clicking. As a matter of fact, it's losing games, and it's lost 2 already, and potentially could lose more when you're going against the highest scoring offense in the ACC next week on the road in a place you've never won. Pat Narduzzi has to be asking himself those questions. And is he going to come to an answer that leads to action in the middle of a season? Probably not. The vast majority of coaches would not make a move in the middle of the season. Some will, I know. Most won't. And I suspect Pat Narduzzi is the type that won't. But he's got to be asking those questions. He has to be asking himself, how did we get here? Because losing Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison, that's bad. That's really bad. That's going to set any offense back. But I think Pitt felt good about the pieces they brought in. I think Pitt felt good about the offensive personnel that they had. And I think for good reason. These guys have proven track records of producing, in college football and playing well in college football. And so if you're Pat Narduzzi and you feel like, well, we've got guys who can play, but it's not working right now, you've got to ask yourself why. You've got to ask yourself what's missing in this equation. And I think, I don't know how long the flight from Louisville to Pittsburgh is, but between, the flight from, Louisville to Pittsburgh and then the drive from Pittsburgh, international, I guess back to the facility, and then the drive from the facility back to his house, wherever he lives, he's got to be asking himself that question. Because the offense has cost them 2 games this year. And very well could cost them more games if they don't figure something out. And he's got to ask that question. Let's see. John Marzullo says, Chris, it just seems Keaton Slovis has no idea when to throw it away or check it down, and instead he takes sacks and chucks it deep and says a prayer. Yeah, look, I definitely think there are issues with Slovis's play. The 2 interceptions were terrible. I think that pass to Konate Mumfield, the one that got intercepted on the first drive, I honestly think, Slovis must have, my only guess is he had it in his head before the ball was snapped that he was throwing it to Mumfield. And you want to give your guy a chance to make a play, all right, then you need to throw that ball a little bit different. You need to tap the A button as opposed to holding it. If you play Madden, you know what I'm talking about. Because he threw a dart when he needed to float it, put it over both of their heads, and give Mumfield a chance to reach out into the end zone to try to get it, or the ball sails out of bounds. Not throw it where he threw it, which was a perfect opportunity for an interception. And even as Tim Hasselbeck, which we don't need to get into any commentator criticism here, because that's not our jobs to offer input on that or opinions on that. But even he pointed out on the pass to Gavin Thompson, which shout out to Gavin Thompson making a big catch on the sideline. What was that? That was 2nd and 4. Nice catch for 19 yards. He even pointed out that pass probably should have been intercepted if the DB was paying attention. And so, I think there are times when he just decides ahead of time where he's going with the ball. I think he again, doesn't look real comfortable in the pocket. Even times when he does seem to have time, he doesn't look all that comfortable, which is not uncommon among quarterbacks. I mean, I think you could say that about Kenny Pickett basically every year prior to last season, that he didn't look comfortable in the pocket. I talked about that a lot. I talked about it on the Panther-Lair show. I talked about, Kenny Pickett not looking comfortable in the pocket, that for 2021, the thing he needed to do was grow up in his pocket presence and sort of feeling comfortable when he dropped back and understanding how to read the defense and how to stand in the pocket and all of that. And Kedon Slovis doesn't seem to have that. Despite his prior success, he's not showing a lot of that this season. And so you have that pass, or you have, he's getting, sacked, or he's under pressure and he throws up in a heave for that second interception. He managed to get off the one pass to Carter Johnson that Johnson pulled in with one hand. That was a pretty great catch, and a nice play by Slovis. But I feel like there were two or three other plays just like that one, and he didn't get so lucky because he didn't really throw it to anyone. He's struggling. And we talked a lot during the off week about things that could be done to help him, about how to, quick passes, working in quicker passes, dink and dunk, check down passes, stuff to the flat. It doesn't all have to, be a 35-yard pass downfield. West Coast concepts. I mean, these things can work, and maybe are good for a quarterback like Slovis, who's playing the way he is and maybe struggling the way he is. But again, this is a guy who has had success. And granted, he had some really good wide receivers at USC. And that's part of it. If Jordan Addison was on this team, maybe it would look a little different. Maybe Slovis would have a little bit more success. But I think there's still some other questions about this offense that I don't know if even that would really answer. Let's see. Just going to read through a few of these. A lot of people are touching on some things that we've already touched on. The Panther Room says you got to make a move at quarterback. Will says not benching Slovis in the second half was coaching negligence. The entire offensive staff needs to be ruthlessly reevaluated at the end of the season. Just a tired effort all around. The Panther Room says with this quarterback and offensive coordinator, 7 wins will be a successful season. North Carolina and Syracuse is going to be an ugly game. To which Will replies, Syracuse is a paper tiger. Carolina is a concern, though. Well, Carolina is a concern because if you want to beat Carolina, you have to be able to score on them. You have to be able to put up a lot of points because they're going to put up a lot of points. No matter how well Pitt's defense plays, I don't see them shutting down North Carolina's offense. Now, North Carolina's defense is suspect. A lot of teams have run up a lot of points and a lot of yards on North Carolina's defense, so it can be done. It's just a question of whether this Pitt offense can do it. Is this Pitt offense good enough to take advantage of a weak defense? And Carolina absolutely is susceptible. But I just don't know if Pitt can score enough. They might have a quote-unquote good day at the offense and still only get like 24 or 28 points. And Carolina will probably get 35 or 38. It's not going to be enough. Because I have no faith in this offense being able to score enough to beat Carolina. And I thought there was a possibility, Carolina has a really suspect run defense. Like I said, they gave up 300 rushing yards to Duke. Maybe Pitt could go in and play ball control in that game and run the ball really well and, keep Carolina's offense on the sideline and win time of possession and all that stuff. I just, something is fundamentally broken with this offense. It's broken. And it's been broken all year. It was broken in the game when Izzy Abanikanda breaks Tony Dorsett's record. It was broken that day too. And now you're 7 games into it, and I said this to somebody the other day. I was like, we're past the point of a small sample size here. We're not talking about 2 games anymore, or 3 games, or 1 game. This is 6 games, now 7. This is 7 games. And I think we can draw some pretty definitive conclusions about this. And the conclusions aren't good. The conclusions are not good. Let's see, super chatter here. Bill Florgian says, at this point, you either bench Slovis or fire Signetti, one or the other. Smarter people to me know, but something has to give. So I guess I would wonder about this. If if you weren't willing to change quarterbacks in the middle of this game when you're facing a loss, are you then going to be willing to change quarterbacks in the middle of next week? I'm really not sure. I'm really not sure that Pat Narduzzi would do it. I don't know. Like if this game, in the middle of the game, wasn't enough to convince you to make a change to try and salvage this game, are you then going to make a change in the middle of next week to try to salvage the season? I just don't know. I just don't know if he would do it. Tony Sadaka says, I said a few weeks ago, put the true freshman in at quarterback. Pitt could lose 3 more games. Well, Pitt doesn't have a true freshman quarterback on the roster, at least not a scholarship guy. They do have a redshirt freshman in Nate Yarnell, the guy who played at Western Michigan. And I'm very intrigued by Yarnell. Looking ahead to the future, I like his potential. I liked what he showed at Western Michigan. I think there's a lot of promise and potential there. I honestly think Nick Patty is still probably the number 2 quarterback on this roster. I think that's probably for a variety of reasons. I think they like his experience. I think they like his mobility. When Nick Patty has gotten an opportunity, he's more or less made plays. Limited opportunities, admittedly, but still, 2020 at Florida State, obviously the Peach Bowl, occasionally here and there when he's gone in place of Kenny Pickett. I mean, you could even go back to 2019 when he was a redshirt freshman and he started that game against Delaware. They barely won that, but a week earlier against UCF, he had a touchdown pass. That upset of UCF, Nick Patty threw a touchdown. So when he has gone into games, I mean, when he's had opportunities, he has made plays. And I think he would probably be the guy they would go with. Like I say, I'm very intrigued by Nate Yarnell, and I personally would like to see him get more opportunities. But I think Patty would probably still be the guy. Benjamin Glazer says, this Pitt team loses to Syracuse, Duke, and North Carolina. You need to beat Miami and Virginia for a bowl. Chances that they don't and end up staying home in December. I mean, look, I'm always the one who tries not to overreact to one game, tries not to be too much in the heat of the moment. Right after a game, they're going to win every game they play. They're going to lose every game they play. I try to avoid that. But I don't think I'm just in the heat of the moment with one game here. I think I'm looking at 7 games and saying, all right, this offense is what it is. And, it's going to be tough to win games if they keep playing like this. Unless they figure it out. And the opportunity to figure it out was the last 2 weeks when they had off. They had time off, time to sit in the office and try to figure something out. And there were points in the first half where I thought it looked like they did. There were points in the first half where I thought they were trying to emphasize some things that they didn't necessarily emphasize enough in the first 6 games. Trying to move the pocket. I thought they ran a lot of play action. I thought they mixed in the play action with the handoffs. Really kept Louisville kind of guessing a little bit. They had the pass to Gavin Bartholomew, the pass to Daniel Carter on the first play of their first offensive drive. I thought they were doing some things in the first half. Not just the Wildcat, but some other things in the passing game that were effective and seemed to be working and seemed to be sort of innovative compared to what they were doing in the first 6 games. But then they either went away from it, or they stopped running it well, or they stopped calling it. I don't know what it was, but progressively as the game went on, quality of play, degraded considerably. And the quality of the plays, and the quality of the play calling, and the quality of the execution. It was all a mess. And now, you look ahead in another 5 games, and you say, where is it going to get better? Why would you believe that it's going to get better when it hasn't to this point? Joe New, Super Chatter, says, we suck, we suck, we suck. Did I mention that we suck? You did, Joe New. Appreciate you. Let's see. New Super Chatter came in. Will, as the Super Chatter says, I'm seeing notable Pitt football alums calling out our quarterback and offensive coordinator by name on social media. Should tell us all we need to know about the state of this team. Yeah? I guess I haven't seen the tweet you're talking about. I'll have to go look for that later. John Waffle, H2P, as the Super Chatter says, why did we hire Cignetti in the first place. Look, Frank Cignetti was hired because Frank Cignetti was hired because Pat Narduzzi wanted more balance in the offense. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Just, I think, look, if you go coordinator by coordinator, what Pat Narduzzi was looking for, he hired Jim Chaney. Chaney had been a Power 5 coordinator. He felt he was an older, more experienced coach, somebody who could be sort of the head coach of the offense, and Narduzzi could be the head coach of the team with an eye toward the defense, as he helped sort of mentor Josh Conklin, a younger defensive coordinator, and that's what he wanted. Chaney kind of works out, kind of doesn't. He's a rambling man anyway, and didn't always see eye to eye with Narduzzi. He leaves. Narduzzi hires Matt Canada, a guy that he knows. He's got a little bit of history with. He's had success. He's coached in the ACC. Comes in, obviously has a great year. Canada leaves for more money at LSU. Narduzzi, a little sore about it, brings in someone a little more conventional. Again, a guy he knows in Sean Watson, but somebody he feels like could be loyal. Watson ends up running the ball like crazy, sets records in 2018, but they throw for 8 yards in the ACC championship game, and the passing game ultimately is the reason, it just not being good enough is a big part of the reason they lose the Sun Bowl against Stanford. So Narduzzi makes another change. And he makes this one intentionally. This is the first coach he's fired, or the first offensive coordinator he fires. He fires Sean Watson, and he wants somebody who can come in and elevate the passing game and help develop the quarterbacks and bring up the passing game. And so he brings in Mark Whipple, and Whipple does exactly that. He throws the ball a ton, doesn't really work all that well for the first 2 years, but by 2021, Kenny Pickett's used to the offense. Pickett is developed. He's a fifth-year senior. He knows the scheme really well, and it works to perfection. But all they do is throw it. And maybe there were situations where they could have relied on the run a little bit more, and it might have been advantageous for the team to do so. And so Narduzzi goes out not looking for a return to Sean Watson's run-only offense, but looking for something more balanced. He wants a coordinator with a history of balancing the run and the pass, of playing to the team's strengths, getting the ball to the playmakers. And if those playmakers are running backs, handing it off a bunch. And if they have playmakers at wide receiver, getting the ball to those guys. And that's what Narduzzi goes looking for. And he finds a guy in Frank Cignetti who has a lot of experience in the NFL, a lot of experience in college football, and a lot of experience calling balanced offenses. Most notably when he was here in 2009 and 2010, when the offense was really balanced. It was a well-balanced offense between Dion Lewis at running back and Jonathan Baldwin at wide receiver and Doran Dickerson at tight end. And I think, one thing that made me confident or optimistic about Cignetti as a play caller is the work that he did in 2009, not just getting the ball to Lewis and Dickerson and Baldwin, but also the work that he did with Bill Stahl. And so I thought, okay, he helped make Bill Stahl into a really successful, really effective, really efficient college quarterback. Now he's going to get this guy from USC who was pretty good at USC, pretty good as a starting Power 5 quarterback. He's going to get this guy, and he's going to work with him, and, look what he did with Stahl. I bet he can do a great job with Slovis as well. And so I think probably Pat Narduzzi looked at it from that perspective too, not necessarily saying, oh, look what he did with Stahl, but saying, okay, this is a guy who has a lot of experience. He's been around a lot of places, and he can run a balanced offense. And I think that's what Pat Narduzzi wanted. Not even necessarily a 50-50 split. I think he's learned, and he showed it with his hiring of Mark Whipple, and I think he definitely learned or had the lesson reinforced last season. But I think he has learned that you do need to throw it to win games in college football. I don't think Narduzzi wanted to go back. I know he said the other day he wishes he could run for 400 yards every game. But I think he knows that's not feasible. I think he knows you have to throw the ball. And I think he hired Cignetti believing that it would, Cignetti would still run an effective passing game, a team that could attack downfield and move the ball through the air while also having an established running game to help carry the load, help eat up clock, and help build even more strength in the passing game through the use of play action. And all of that makes a lot of sense on paper. All of that, when I say it, makes a lot of sense. And that's why I was on board with a hire. You know what I mean? When we talked about it, I was like, this is a good hire. This is the kind of guy that they need. They can finally find that balance between Sean Watson's run all the time and Mark Whipple's pass all the time. You get this offense that's still a lot of pass, but more run than it was under Whipple. More passing than Watson, but a little less than Whipple. And more running than Whipple, but a lot less than Watson. And the play calling for a good portion of the season has followed that mold. They just have sucked at passing. I mean, it's been a disaster. And whether that's on Slovis, whether that's on the receivers, whether that's on Cignetti, it's been really bad. And this is where I'm coming to this sort of crossroads of saying, you know what? I'm actually not convinced that these players are bad. Although Keaton Slovis obviously was a big problem tonight. Let's see. We have another super chatter come in here. Joe New says Cignetti beat our butts when he was at Boston College. Yeah, you're right. He really trashed Pitt in 2020 when Boston College won because of a missed extra point. Let's see here. Scroll through. Where was I? I see where I left off with the non-super chatters. Lucky Rat says, is Hammond done again? I don't know. He came up limping. I don't know if I can find that play that I wrote down, but he was back in again after that. I thought he played, there was a play where he came up limping, and can't find out where I wrote it down. But I thought he played again after that one. Oh well, it's inconsequential. I don't know. We'll see. Even if he did come back in, that doesn't necessarily mean that he escaped injury altogether. It's he still could be hurt as he gets back into Pittsburgh and relax. After you sleep on it, sometimes you can wake up pretty sore. Let's see. The Real Deal says Slovis may have the physical tools, but he has very poor football instincts. I mean, I don't think there's any question about the physical tools. He's got a great arm, and he throws the ball really well. It's just not clicking, some of those other elements, like we say, of deciding when to, how to throw the ball, when to put touch on it, when to throw a little more heat on it, leading the receivers, things like that. Doesn't seem to click all that well. Karen and Gary Lang say, pretty sure Slovis thought he would have better NFL chances after this year. It's not going to happen for him. Yeah, I mean, that's if Keaton Slovis was thinking he was going to go to Pitt for 1 year, have a bunch of success, and go to the NFL, I got to think those plans are being rethought at this point. Brendan Hominick, I'm sorry, Brendan, if I mispronounced your last name, says Panarduzzi's inability to try something different after weeks of issues is troubling. I mean, so they rolled the Wildcat out. That was an attempt to try something different. I don't think, that's something. I like I said, I feel like the first couple drives, I thought they were approaching it a little bit differently than they had earlier this season. Like I say, I mean, they threw on their first play, and it wasn't, let's take a shot. It was play action, roll out to Daniel Carter for 8 yards. I love that play. I love that play on first down, whether it's the first play of the first drive or it's a first down in the middle of the third drive, whatever it is. I think that's a great play. I think it's a perfect kind of play because I love this offense. I think this offense has a great opportunity when you get. Every offense is good when they get to 2nd and 2, but I think an offense that runs the ball like this one does so effectively, if you can get like a 2nd and 2, you're really in great shape. And so something like that, play action, roll out, Daniel Carter, 8 yards. That's about as good as it gets. Like that is perfection for this offense. And they convert. Abanikanda takes a handoff on 2nd and 2 and goes 10 yards. And then they throw to El Barto for 18. I mean, and then Abanikanda for 15. It was a perfect sort of start to the drive, and it really looked like, okay, this is the kind of offense. Look, if you listen to the Panther-Lair show on Wednesday night, pretty much any episode of the Morning Pit this past week or even the week before, I talked so much. I talked over and over and over again about getting into a rhythm, about rhythm passing, about short passes, about trying to pick up those 7 or 8 yard gains, about working Gavin Bartholomew into it. And then as you're getting those things going, you mix in the run and it all just clicks. And boy, howdy was it going on the first drive. Like the first drive was almost exactly what I described. I think there was a point on Wednesday night where I described what my scripted first possession would be. And it was almost that. It was very close to that. Short passes in the flat. Gavin Bartholomew runs. It was that. And then a really poor decision on 2nd and 10 from wherever they were, the 29. A really poor decision by Kedon Slovis to throw it downfield and try and take a shot toward the end zone when he had, you dance with who brung you, right? And who brung them to the 29 at that point was short passes. Handoffs, passes in the flat. And when he rolls out and he takes a shot to Konate Mumfield, he's throwing the ball over Daniel Carter's head right in front of him. It just, unless it was, Frank Signetti said, no, you've got to throw to Mumfield on this play. It was a really bad decision by Slovis because what they had done to that point, he sort of went away from, even though the opportunity to continue doing that was right in front of him and would have kept the drive going and possibly even moved the chains right on that play. In worst case scenario, you're looking at 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, something like that. But that wasn't what happened. So I guess my point is I think they tried some different things. I thought it looked different than it had earlier this season. Particularly in the early going of this game. In the first half, I thought it looked a little different. Not to mention the Wildcat, which was obviously something they haven't done at all through the first half of the season. So, they tried some different things, and a lot of them worked. Just some really bad decisions and 3 turnovers inside the 30. It sunk them. Let's see. Kevin Plaucha says, I think this team will struggle to get to 6-6. I genuinely believe that after tonight. Holy S, that was absolutely terrible. It wasn't good. Chris Popovich says, I seriously do not understand how Slovis was actually a decent quarterback at USC. Well, that's a question, right? Because he was. And Will says he had more than one skilled wide receiver at USC and wasn't concussed every other game. I think there's something to the concussion thing. I think he got knocked around against Tennessee, and I think that probably lingered and has caused some issues. And certainly he had wide receiver talent at USC that he doesn't have at Pitt. But that's not good enough for me because I think the receivers at Pitt are talented. I think he's got good receivers to throw to here. Maybe not as good as what he had at USC, but good enough that it doesn't have to be this bad. And I think he is a better quarterback than he's shown. There's just something else missing with this offense, with the production of the offense, the design of the offense, and the play calling, and all of those things. Coaster King says, there has to be an assistant coach overhaul in the offseason, surely. I mean, there almost always is. There's almost always changes. And I would have to think that if this season continues trending in the direction that it's been trending, you're going to have some real changes in the offseason. I would think. Christian Ricketts says, I like the fact they did something newer with the Wildcat. Man, Slovis looks at one receiver and that's it. Yeah. He, I don't know what he's reading. I don't know what his reads are. I don't know what his progressions are. I don't know what he's seeing on the field. I don't know what he's told to look at. I don't know what the plays are. Right? I said during the off week that if it was me, I would, cut down on his reads, maybe just cut the field in half, or just 1 read, 2 read, check down, a 1 read, check down, like just to get it going. I threw out those stats, through the first 6 games. When Slovis gets rid of the ball in less than 2.5 seconds, he's completing like 78% of his passes and averaging a lot more yards per attempt than when he holds onto the ball longer than 2.5 seconds. And so I said, look, just get rid of the ball quickly. And I think that's what they need to do. And, stuff like roll out passes to the fullback, roll out passes to the tight end. I mean, those are things that can be done quickly that are probably going to be open a lot. And there are going to be opportunities to pick up little chunks of yards, and occasionally you break a tackle or two and you get a big chunk of yards. Do those things. The running back screen too. When was that on that was on the touchdown drive. It was 2nd and 14. Little slip screen to Izzy Abanikanda. How many of those have we seen this season? Not many. Not too many this year. And it worked out great. 37 yards. Ends up leading to a touchdown one play later. So that was sort of new, I thought, in the offense. We haven't seen them run too many of those. We haven't seen them really try to run too many of those. And it worked to perfection. And maybe it worked because they haven't done it very much this season and Louisville wasn't really prepared for it. But I tend to think it worked because it's a good play. And if you execute it well, you can get a chunk of yards. Maybe not going to get 37 every time, but you can get 7 or 8 or 6. And all of those things are good gains. Now, in 2nd and 14, it's a bit of a different situation. 6 or 7 is not really going to help you all that much. But if you run that play on 1st and 10 or 2nd and 8 or something like that, 2nd and 4, you're going to have a chance to pick up some much needed yards. And so I thought that was another one that was sort of new and welcome, because that's something that you drop back, you're getting rid of it quickly, and you're giving the playmaker a chance to make a play. Seems like a good plan, but it's not really part of the offense. Of course, they tried again on 3rd and 5 late in the game, and he just misses the throw altogether because it was just that kind of night. Let's see. The super chatters that came in late. No, not yet. Trying to scroll through here. We're coming down on our time. Got about 10 minutes or so left while we're talking. Let's see. Trying to get some more comments and questions. Garrett Sherwin says, where did the Slovis from the Tennessee game go? And am I correct that he has another year of eligibility? Yeah, Keaton Slovis does have another year of eligibility if he wants it. If he wants to come back in 2024 or 2023, he could do that for his COVID year. Kind of come back for an extra year like Kenny Pickett did. If he wants to, or he could transfer somewhere else and play, I would presume, or he could try for the NFL. He's going to have some things to think about in the offseason. Let's see. Travis Spagnolo says, friends and I spent a lot of money to come to Louisville for 4 days to show a primetime audience that Pitt is a bottom 5 ACC team. Wow, it's not on Signetti. Narduzzi is enamored with Slovis. First of all, Travis, I hope you had a good time in Louisville. I've often said this, and not to take away from the lighthearted nature of our show so far, but Louisville is one of my favorite trips in the ACC. I really like going to Atlanta. I always recommend that to people. And I probably, if I had to pick a second location that I enjoy traveling to the most, just for the whole experience of being there, both the game and the city, Louisville will be pretty high on the list. Went there a couple times when Pitt played in the Big East, and had a great time every time. I really just enjoyed my experience in Louisville every time I was there. And so I can't recommend it enough. So Travis, I hope, obviously the game didn't go the way you wanted it to go, but I hope you enjoyed your trip overall to go to Louisville. Narduzzi enamored with Slovis. I don't know. He kept Slovis in because he presumably felt like that was the best option, even though Slovis had thrown 2 really bad interceptions. Maybe Narduzzi looked at the first half and said, look, okay, we missed out on some points, cost us anywhere from 6 to 14 points with really bad interceptions thrown on poor decisions at inopportune times. But the offense moved well for the most part. We got into those situations thanks to Keaton Slovis's play, and so we, that's why we stuck with him. I can imagine Narduzzi saying that. Steve Kramer's putting some quotes. I'm assuming you got these from Twitter, saying that Narduzzi says Slovis is the starter for Pitt moving forward. I would imagine. I would imagine that's exactly what Pat Narduzzi would say after a game, even if he's going to give it some thought later in the week. or through the week, I would imagine he would say right after the game that they're going to stick with Keaton Slovis. He's not going to come out right after the game and say, no, man, I'm benching my quarterback or I'm reconsidering my quarterback. That's just not what he does. He's not going to come out and say that. He's going to say that he's sticking by his guy, and then he'll go home and actually consider it and make a decision. But like I said, if he wasn't convinced to bench Keaton Slovis at this point, I'm not sure what he's going to reconsider over the course of the week to, I don't know what he's going to reconsider over the course of the week that would make him, lead him to make a different decision. OOF McGee says Narduzzi is 0 for 3 on OC hires and all the old MFs, old ASF when he hires them. 0 of 3 on OC hires. He's hired 5. Jim Chaney, Matt Canada, Sean Watson, Mark Whipple, Frank Signetti. And what's funny about those guys is they each kind of had their own success in different ways. I mean, obviously, Canada, beat Penn State and Clemson and set a Pitt record for scoring in a season. Most, highest average points per game in a season. Whipple broke that record in 2021. He had a Heisman Trophy finalist and a Biletnikoff Award winner and won 11 games in the ACC championship. So I would say those two were pretty good hires. Watson, obviously, I mean, that was pretty bad. But they still ended up producing 2 1,000-yard rushers for the only time in school history and won the Coastal Division. So it wasn't all bad. Signetti's been pretty rough so far. Chaney just kind of happened. Not really sure what you would say about that. But I don't know how you could say Narduzzi's 0 of 3 on OC hires. I'm missing that one. Let's see. John Johnson says, I don't see how anyone can defend still playing Slovis at quarterback. I would have pulled him at halftime today. Yeah, maybe. I think I probably would have made the same decision. Montana Marie says, what does refusing to make a quarterback switch say to Patty and Yarnell? We think you'll be even worse? That's so offensive. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's what the message is. Let's see. Scrolling down here. Let's see what else. Just seeing what other comments we have here. We just have a couple more minutes, and then we're going to call it an evening. But Rick Rubish says, not sure what the offense wants to be. They run when they should pass and pass when the running game is working. Well, I mean, you got to mix it up. I mean, you can't just do the same thing over and over again. And, you want to keep the defense guessing and all that stuff. I think, not to come back to that first drive, but pass, run, pass, run, pass. That's mixing it up. That's going back and forth. That's balancing the offense. That was a good balanced offense. Second drive, what do? They run. Pass. Let me see here. Pass. Just trying to read my own handwriting. Pass. Run. Pass, screen, run. I think early on in this game, they were mixing it up. It was going back and forth. It was some run and some pass. They were doing a good job kind of getting both elements going, and it was working. I didn't hate the design of the offense pretty much in the first half. They just sunk themselves with those turnovers. I thought it was kind of working in the first half. It just... those turnovers were killers, and I think that goes on. Keaton Slovis with those. All right, let's see what else we have to get. You guys got a lot of comments and questions, but we're coming almost out of time here as we come up on the 1 hour mark, and that's usually where we like to cut it. Look, there's 5 games left to go. All right, and we spent a lot of time in the last 2 weeks talking about what they need to do, how they need to fix the offense, what does the offense need to do in the second half, what do they need to focus on. We talked about all those things. And those topics feel tired now. It feels like it's too late. That whatever you were going to fix or whatever you needed to fix, you needed to do it a week ago. You needed to do it during the off week. And it's too late to fix things now. Now, maybe you found some things that you could do well, and you did some of that in the first half. And maybe you can try and build on that. Maybe you can try and replicate that performance. But I don't know if you're really going to do it well enough to score with North Carolina. And I think more to the point, before you even start thinking of how can we beat Carolina, I think tonight Pat Narduzzi has to take a pretty hard look at himself and think long and hard about why this offense, with this personnel, that by all accounts should be much better than it is, or should perform much better than it has, why this group has struggled as mightily as it has. You need to find an answer to that question. And I don't know what the answer is. There are a lot of guesses we can make. But Pat Narduzzi needs to find an answer to that question. Listen, you didn't like that game tonight. I know, but you should like this video because hopefully you enjoyed the post-game talk. I know I had fun with it. Me and my buddy Clayton James. I was glad. I appreciate Clayton James stopping by for the podcast tonight. But listen, click the like button, click the subscribe button. Subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. No matter what happens with this team, I mean, we're still going to keep chugging away here. We're chugging. That was topical. We're going to keep plugging away here. We're going to have the Morning Pit every morning, Monday through Friday. Have a new video for you at 15, 20 minutes. Hey, Pitt basketball. They got started on Saturday. We could talk about hoops. We'll be talking about everything going on in the world of Pitt sports Monday through Friday in the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We'll have the live Panther-Lair show on Wednesday night at 8:30 as we always do. We'll have this post-game show next week, probably around the same time after the North Carolina game on Saturday night. And then, of course, Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. You're not happy about what's going on. No Pitt fans are happy about what's going on. Get on the message boards and complain together. Misery loves company. Come hang out on the message boards. And, do all those things. We would very much appreciate it. Like I say, click the like button, click the subscribe button so you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. That way you'll always see everything that we put out. We put out a lot of Pitt video content. I think it's pretty good. I hope you enjoy it. I know we enjoy putting it together. Pitt loses 24-10. Falls to 4-3 overall. Pretty bad turn of events for the Panthers. Not the way they wanted to start the second half of the season. And definitely facing a lot of challenges as they moved into the final 5 games. But I'm glad we could get together and talk about it afterward. Thanks so much for tuning in tonight. Thanks for listening afterwards. Thanks for listening during the week if that's when you did. We appreciate all the people who joined the live stream, got in the chat screen, people, the super chatters and everything like that. I appreciate everybody. So thanks again. Have a great rest of the weekend. Try to put this game behind you. We'll talk to you Monday morning for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.